You're where you're actually at for tenure?
I hope it won't take February.
And I guess you haven't gone back to mentor. But you have other practices.
It's not a money issue.
Yeah, it's just you feel silly.
And I'd like to Yeah, so what happened?
With us, it was damned if we didn't figure it out. Don't give her a drink of water right before she goes to bed. She went back and forth to go for a couple of weeks, and then she beat her back, and then she like ran, and we did a week and a half driving away from back to
It'd probably be like
daycare.
Oh, well, that would definitely do it.
Well, he only started on Tuesday, so it's not daycare. He's one of those kids that trains. I think probably Skylar brought it. Figure out crawling and standing up. Before he'd been sort of wiggling along the ground, he's like, yeah, I got home and Karen said, what? And she packed his favorite toy up on top of the couch.
And got it?
Yeah. First he got up the belly and he crawled. Wow, that's cool. And then, no, wait, that's not the one. Now we have to move everything in the house up by a foot. Yeah. So they look he'll be naked. He just started daycare. He's going to be sick for 8 months.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
oh, Skylar. Now that we're back, Skylar's back in daycare. Max, we only got his part-time. Today was the first day where it's only the second day.
Okay. Can I grab everybody's attention? I think we'll get started. I know some of you are still grabbing your goodies in the background. So it's a huge pleasure today to welcome Mary Czerwinski, who I have now known. I was trying to figure out this morning what year it was I actually met you, but it's not quite 15 years, and it's certainly more than 10 years. So it has been a while. So Mary's academic background is in cognitive psychology and experimental psychology. She has been at Microsoft now since 1995 and with MSR, so Microsoft Research specifically since 1997. She is managing a group there known as the Visualization and Interaction in Business and Entertainment, and the acronym, the really cool acronym is VIBE, and it's a group of about 20 to 25 researchers. And they're doing an array of really neat stuff. She's going to be telling you a lot more about it. But the really cool thing is it's diverse, from large displays and multi-displays to understanding how programmers work, to understanding how technologies in the home and supporting families work. Broad array of work that's being done there. It's a very prolific group, very impressive group, a hard group to compete with. And a lot of the accolades can, of course, go to Mary and her team there. I can't tell you about all the stuff that Mary's done because I would take your talk time up, so that wouldn't be very useful. The one thing I did want to specifically point out that I think is almost unique to Mary and quite something is that she has been recognized in our community, the HCI community, not only for her research productivity, but for the service that she's done. So she's run conferences, she's run program committees, she's sat on boards and executives and done all this kind of stuff. So despite running this group at Microsoft, she finds the time to really put into the community. And this has been recognized. So I think you may be one of only 2 people, but I did a quick skim of the list, who has been invited into the Chi Academy and also has a service award, a lifetime service award for her work in HCI. And I only think I found one other person who's got both of these. And I just want to read off what they are. It's very impressive. So for the Chi Academy, these are the principal leaders of the field whose efforts have shaped the disciplines and or industry and led the research and or innovation in human-computer interaction. And for the Lifetime Service Award, it's for extended contributions over many years in a variety of capacities to the community at large. So very, very impressive. I think I first met Mary at Chi. I think I cornered you like during a coffee break to get help on one of my experimental designs. And not only was Mary good enough to talk to me, I may have booked it in advance, I really can't remember, it's that far back. But not only was Mary kind enough to spend the time with me as a grad student who probably didn't know very much at all, but she subsequently invited me to come out to Microsoft and spend some time there with her and the team so that they could help shape the research. She probably thought, oh my gosh, this person needs help. Please come. But she also invited me to stay with her family. And this is just the kind of person that Mary is. So with no further ado, I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Joanna, for that very kind introduction. Of course, I took the time to work with Joanna because she was such a fabulous superstar already as a graduate student. It's not the only reason, but that was one of the reasons, of course, and we've become great friends ever since. Okay, well, it's a real pleasure to be here. I love Vancouver. It's one of my favorite cities in North America, so it's a real thrill to be here. And put me up in a posh hotel. I'm just going to have the time of my life, and already have had a great day today, meeting so many of you. I'm here to just share some of the recent research about my group. I'm actually going to start a little bit historically, and the reason I'm doing that is because I think it's important to underline that when you develop a research program, it does take some time. And when you do a systematic series of experiments on something, you don't ever get it right the first time. You have to figure out what the user problem is you're solving first, then you have to try to solve it. You won't be right the first time when you test it with real users, so you try to solve it again. So my first little thing I'll be sharing with you is how many times we can get something wrong. Maybe that will be inspirational to you. And just so by way of overview, My team has developed a very sincere emphasis on work groups and helping work groups, especially distributed teams, which is a huge problem in our world today. Most companies are very global, and there are hubs and satellites of team members who have to work together, communicate, actually produce together. And when you're distributed and you don't know each other and there hasn't been a good buildup of trust, that's hard. So we've chosen that area to really help team cohesiveness and productivity, and to enhance their social opinions of each other. And I'm going to also, the deep dive I'll do is on a summary of developer team practices and needs. There are many obvious reasons why I would choose developers. I have a nice cash cow of developers at Microsoft that I can work with. The cool thing about that is that they all want to improve their productivity. They are all distributed, usually with an agile group and then some distributed team members as well, or whole teams. And they really want to solve these problems that we've taken on as a group, so they will let us install things in their environments and watch them, and that's really fun. And we've worked really hard to prototype to do these solutions. So I'll talk about visualization for group awareness and activity. I'll talk about social media and data mining. We do a lot of logging and trying to bubble that up and analyze that up for cool things you can do with the data. And then I'll end with just a taste for some real disruptive user technologies. And actually, most of the group is doing that stuff I'm going to end with and beyond, really cool new things you can do with sensors and wearables and video. But in order to emphasize the development of a research program and how hard it is, I've chosen to start historically and maybe not focus so much on the cool stuff that's happening now. So hopefully that makes sense and holds together. And I'm going to start with visualization for group awareness. Typical dev team at Microsoft, kind of take note of that. Think to yourself some benefits and some downsides of this environment. Okay, we'll talk about that later. We started out working with Rob DeLine and Wolfram Schulte and several people in the programming languages group. And we chose a problem that dev teams were coming to us with, saying, we are onboarding, like 800 new developers per month in a particular division, and they don't know the 8 code bases they're supposed to be working in. How can we help them? And we're like, oh, this is interesting. So let's study what's hard about programming environments today, and especially like coming up to speed on a code base. So we did, and we found bunches of things that were wrong, but the main thing seemed to be navigation. Finding things, remembering where places in the code were, too many tabs open. And so we thought, wow, this would be a really interesting problem to solve first. So we built this thing called Team Tracks. And what it does is it records where the team is working in a code base, the whole team, all the team members. Their tracks, the places they go in the code, not the actual things they type, but the places they go, are entered into a centralized server and aggregated. And so it's a very simple tool. As you can see, I'll try to use the cursor here to guide you. There's this two little windows here. This window here that I'm highlighting on the far left for you shows if you're in a line of code, this guy's an int figure, if you're at a particular function in the code, where do people typically come from when they get to this, and where do they typically go next? And this little window allows you then, if you click on something that people tended to go next or come from when they're in this line of code, shows a little preview of that code. Sounds very simple, right? The hypothesis was the places in the code base that people tend to travel to the most often and go back and forth between these places, those are like really important parts of the code. Those are like beacons, that's what we called them. That's an old term from software engineering literature. The other thing we could do with this, other than show people where people tended to go in relation to a feature or a function in the code base, was we can take the Explorer window, the file hierarchy, and we can actually collapse it quite well, because there's no reason to show all the folders and files, right? It's important to show the folders and files where most people go in the code. So you can see I've got the shortened one with the favorites, so to speak, here on the near left, and then the full one on the right. You can see how much space we saved with the file hierarchy. So very simple idea using some team logging. This was the first thing we did. And so we decided to do some user studies to evaluate this. So we picked a real simple code base. It was Tetris. How many people know what Tetris is? Most people should know that, right? And most people have played it. So we brought in developers from outside, and we said, okay, we're going to give you some tasks in the Tetris code base. And they're going to start from very easy tasks to tasks that were very hard. There were 4 tasks. And they had to do things like make a new shape for Tetris, or make the space bar drop the figure straight to the bottom. But then some of the tasks got really hard and required you to know quite a bit of the code base in order to make it happen. And we ran several participants, I think we had 9 or 10 participants, through these tasks. We timed them. We saw how many tasks they were able to accomplish, because I made it 20 minutes per task kind of thing. And then we gave them a quiz, a comprehension quiz of the code base. And I'll show you the results in a minute. But then we did a second study, because what we were doing was we were setting up for the second study. So we were using the logs from the first team who went through the code base to see where the important areas of the code were. So then we could turn on team tracks for a whole other group of developers and see if the team tracks windows helped them do those same 4 tasks. Okay? Well, the first hypothesis was that navigation frequency in the code base actually correlated with importance ratings. We had these developers rate areas of the code for how important they were to the tasks. And in fact, we did get that positive, significant correlation that if you went more frequently to certain parts of the code, those were the more important areas of the code for those tasks we gave. So that was good. And then what we found was with the second group of developers, they actually were able to accomplish more of the tasks. And especially they were able to accomplish more of the very difficult tasks. So 7 out of 9 of them were able to finish task 4, which was the hardest task, within 20 minutes. And the quiz scores, how well they comprehended the code when we gave them complex questions about the code, was significantly higher for the group with team tracks. Now, with anything, when I went out into the field and actually deployed this with real developers, you learn all kinds of things you don't learn in the lab, right? This is another lesson. Lab studies are great for, is this a good idea? Could this work? But then you go out in the field and you find out, oh, I didn't expect them to do that. So the first thing that happens is I did get a validation for team tracks. I was working with a set of researchers and real product people who worked on a code base very infrequently. So we logged them for 3 months, hoping we'd get enough log data, and then we had them go do what they do in their daily tasks, and I just observed them for a day. And one guy was ready to make some changes in the code. He said, I want to make some changes in the code, but I'm really afraid because I know there's something related to where I am in the code, and I'm afraid I'm going to break it, but I can't remember what the name of it is. And I've been looking for it, and he's like really stressed out. And then he looks down, and this was something I saw in the study. You have to remember to look for team tracks because you're not used to team tracks. But he happened to see it. And he saw the area of the code, the preview of the code, that he was afraid he was going to break. And he saw he wasn't going to break it, and like the stress just melted away. And he said, oh, God, I can fix this. And I don't have to worry about it. Thank you, team tracks, that kind of thing. But then the other thing I saw, which were some negatives, was that there were people who worked in the code base that worked in crazy parts of the code base. And everybody would go like, oh, would you just turn off Bert's tracks? Because it's terrible. It's taking me to bug places in the code that I don't even want to know. Or they'd say things like, oh, I only want to look at John's tracks because John's really good. And the rest of them are not so good. So I was like, okay, there are social dynamics, as we'll see in everything we do when you work with teams. So we definitely made some improvements so you could turn on and off individual people, and they seem to be happier. That actually got shipped to Internet Explorer right when Firefox was coming into competition with us, and Internet Explorer had 8 versions of the code base that they were trying to track and maintain, and they fired everybody or laid everybody off or moved them out, whatever they did, to other areas of Microsoft, and no one knew the code bases anymore. And they were like, crap, we've got to change Internet Explorer, and nobody knows the code. So we installed team tracks, and it wasn't that drastic, but it was pretty bad. And so we installed team tracks in the hope that we could onboard their new developers really well. I actually don't know how that all went. Rob DeLine might know better. But hopefully that went well. Okay, next. Oops. Okay, so that was great. So simple logging, and I do want to make the story that all these things that we're learning with developers, you could actually do with real information workers, with you guys. These tools would help us as we work in teams, okay? Developers do have a little bit more structure to their work, But we have tried many of these things on just regular work groups like my group at Microsoft, and they do work. So logging and bubbling up centralized metadata about what people are doing. The message here is it can help the team be more productive. And we'll go into some instances of that. Okay, so let's just iterate on that idea because Team Tracks wasn't exactly right. Some teams said, you know, it's great for me just individually working in the code, but what if we could show like everybody's tracks all at once in the actual code and leverage spatial memory for the layout of the code and show search results and metadata, and all, you know, make it bigger and better. So we did a bunch of surveys to find out if that was truly what people wanted us to do and what would be good for group awareness for dev teams. And we found out lots of things, but the main thing is it has to be really lightweight. I was talking to someone, Charlotte, previously about pens and mobile devices. The reason the technology worked into the work group that she was trying to insert the technology was because they were already using paper and pens. So when you insert something very lightweight that's very much like their current work practices, it's almost always going to be a success, you know, barring you don't screw something else up. So what we learned was these developers, they're having to learn new tools all the time. They have to pay attention to so many information sources. Don't give them something that's like not supporting their existing work practices. And so what we came up with, this was Jacob Beal's work when he was intern with us, was called Fast Dash. Now, this is a bad design, okay? Sorry, Jake. You know, this was what he could do in 3 months, not really having the time to iterate on an idea. It had tons of great positives to it as a design, but it had a lot of negatives. So let me just quickly go through what it was. It's a tree map. How many people know what a tree map visualization is? Okay, it's a space-filling, Tamara could explain it way better than I can, but it's a space-filling visualization technique that allows you to show hierarchical information about files and folders. And the first thing we did wrong with this was we devoted screen real estate to the bigger files and folders. Well, I think we had already said in Team Tracks that the important places in the code are the places people go most often, so we should have done that, but we forgot because it was 2 years later and we made a bad design decision. And we learned because this didn't scale well. But what this shows is for any particular file in a hierarchy, it shows the developer that's working on it, whether or not they've got the file open, whether or not it's checked out, whether or not 2 people have the same file checked out, which is where you see that barbershop pole striping. That means 2 people could collide. Yellow means it's checked out. And then it showed their faces and even what function they were working in. So there was a lot of, like, you know, team information in this visualization of the files and folders. The other thing that was really actually we accidentally found was a great idea was Jake coded in this ability to leave notes. So this team happened to be distributed with people in Argentina and Brazil, and then at Redmond. And at Redmond, they were co-located, and it was a big co-located team of about 6 or 7 people. And what the people who were not co-located with the Agile group would do is use the flag feature to say, hey, I know you guys are sleeping now, but I'm really stuck here. Could you take a look? And accidentally, we made it so that you would see the whole thread of a conversation between multiple developers on this topic when someone got stuck. And people loved that because they could go in and learn, see what people said, but also it gave an asynchronous nature to a real-time visualization that was kind of nice. So lots of things in here. This is what it looked like when you were leaving a note. And it worked automatically alongside existing tools, and you know, we pulled stuff out of repositories to make it work. And it, again, a SQL database was essentially managing the information. So now we had to deploy this. We were really lucky. We found a really nice team over in the Patterns and Practices group. They were Agile, and they said we could install Team Tracks. What we did was we actually looked at them. We had a behavioral coding scheme, and we went in as a pair of observers. And we each had our laptops in this Excel spreadsheet that we kind of automated. So whenever we saw communication or an email or an IM or a phone call or an interruption of some kind or people whiteboarding, we would say who it was and when they did it. And so we had counts of things and frequencies of things. And then we did study them with this coding scheme for 2 days, so a Monday and a Tuesday. Then on Wednesday we went in And yes, there's the confounded passage of time, which we know is a weakness of the design. But on Wednesday we went in, we installed Fast Dash on their walls, and coded again Thursday and Friday, okay, until they went home. And this was the workspace. Did anybody have a thought about the positive or negative effects of this agile workspace? Anybody see anything interesting? Well, first of all, look at their monitors. This was 2007. Their monitors are already, they're doing dual mon, and their monitors are huge, right? And they're turned like this so they can see more code. And sometimes they have a laptop next to their monitors. Well, they were supposed to be sitting facing each other so that they could communicate. They can't even see each other, much less communicate with each other. You can see that the walls are movable and they're just covered with, code and experiments and things like that. But most important to me was something that you may or may not be able to see. I've got a better picture of it later from another team. Way over on the right, there's this board, and it's got stickies on it. Those are the work items, okay? And they had a color-coded work item scheme. And what you were supposed to do as a developer was you were supposed to get up, grab a work item, and they knew the spatial layout of where these things were. I think it was easiest to hardest and something else with the color. And there, you take the work item and you show everybody you got it, and you put it on your monitor so everybody knows you've got that work item, okay? This was like the social convention they'd come up with. And I see this, I said, you're at Microsoft. Why are you using paper? Plus, they put it on their monitor and no one else could read it but them. So nobody really knew what they were working on except for when they first went and grabbed it off the board. So I thought that was really funny but interesting. So they did use Fast Dash. And okay, now I really want you guys to show hands. Do you think Fast Dash would increase communication amongst these guys? Say yes if you do. Yeah? Yeah? Or do you think it would decrease communication? Okay, we thought it would decrease communication. That was the hypothesis we went in. We were like, why would these guys have to talk anymore? We did this beautiful visualization for them, right? Well, what we found was that it really increased. So you increase people, good job. It actually increased in certain kinds of communications 58%. Instruction, orientation. It was because now instead of IMing someone to see if you could talk to them IMing you back, yes you can, okay I'll IM you, I'll come over in a minute. Instead they would stand up and go, what's wrong? Which had never occurred to them to do before because they couldn't see what was going on. And so there was this direct increase in face-to-face. Now, with the remote people, the increase was obviously through the flags, through that asynchronous tool. But even they felt like they were getting more immediate attention from their colleagues. And then an increase in status communication, that came about, we believe, because they would look up at the screen and go, hey, Joe, you can't leave on Friday night, because you got this file checked out. And you're going to break the bill or something like that. And so we saw people literally have to go back and sit down and stuff like that. So we knew it was a good visualization, though, for one reason, and the most important reason. When we tried to take it down, it was my laptop, and we tried to take it down on Friday night. They wouldn't let me take it home. Yeah. So that was good. But we also saw lots of room for improvement. They did like the global view of the project and the instant ability to reflect, but they wanted a lot more. So we went and we did the next iteration. If I can, yeah. So we decided to focus on doing a much longer term evaluation with product teams and to extend the visualization to be more what they wanted because Fast Dash didn't scale, the first one. So we did Whip Dash with a bunch of new interns. And we focused on work items, which is what they asked us to do. But here again, we see what these groups do. They've got the same crazy boards. This one was even worse. They did all these pen things around work items to give you information about them. They had the color coding scheme again. But this was way more complex. This was one team we worked with. Another team we worked with also had a crazy paper artifact system, but they also had an Excel spreadsheet that someone fastidiously maintained, which was a lot of work, and he complained about it. So 2 more groups. We installed Whip Dash in their environments, and you can see what their environments were like. This was one group. Whip Dash was really focused on work items. And this time we focused on another tree map visualization, but we focused on giving more space to places that had more work items open. And you could see there was a concept of time going by. So as you went left to right, you saw what was happening in time. Bigger work items were harder work items, I believe. Now I'm forgetting what the color coding was. But the code showed whether it was a proposed work item, active work item, resolved work item, or closed. And then there was status about it. Was it a feature, a bug, or something else? And if you hovered, I think I have a picture, yes. If you hovered over a work item, you could get some details about it. If you clicked on the details, you could actually go to the work item. So it was better integrated with, a Windows Foundation server, Team Foundation server. We also did an innovative thing that actually was received very well, because you're going to hear in a minute, this design also was not good. The people health bar on the right was used really, really effectively by the teams. So what it did was we had a bar that showed when you were supposed to be done with the work item, because they had done some estimations in their system, and where you actually were. And so it showed when you were actually having a hard time. And this was really great for the more senior people on the team to look and say, oh, I need to intervene. It's been 3 days. You should have been done with this work item in a day. So that was really a useful thing. But again, what we got told was, and this, as a visualization team, this is the worst thing you can ever hear in your life. They said, it's a beautiful visualization, but really all we want to see is a notification or a text list. We're like, really? And so but we were like, okay, we'll go do what you actually want. So we did publish this, and we learned a lot by deploying it for many weeks with these teams. But what we ended up doing was doing way more data integration across more sources, and then focus on alerts. We do have a big visualization, because we're visualization people, and that's what we love to do, so we had to do that too. But there's an emphasis on the most recent activities. So this is what it looks like now. You can actually make it just come up as toast in your toolbar on the lower right side of your monitor if you want, that big top thing. But we actually have this on a display in our hallway, and it's kind of like a 10-foot viewing distance on this big display. And we make it so that's real easy to read that top thing. That could also be the notifications. So people from far away, from many offices, can see who just checked something in or who just fixed some bug. I know they were using it because people like Scott Saponis in my group, when he was an intern, would go by and go, I'm always on the board. You know, I'm working harder than you. And the other thing I heard was that they wrote their check-in messages much more for human consumption than they normally would, because they knew people on the team would be reading them. So that was interesting. But what we're showing here now is a chronology of work items. Again, they're color-coded by what kind they are. But what we gave the team members the ability to do was filter by which project it was for, which people. So if you just wanted to follow Jim, the really good guy, you'd just follow Jim, the really good guy, and just get his notifications. And this is what it looks like for a real team. This was the Visual Studio team, really early in the product cycle. So it looks real clean and real nice. But just to show you its scales, this is what it looked like right before they were ready to ship. So it did get cluttered. What we had to do was really space out the times we were showing for check-ins and stuff and do more glomming. But it was able to scale for Visual Studio, which was a huge file base and activity base. This they liked very much, and Visual Studio continues to run this in their testing team. So I think this has great benefits, and we continue to work on this. But I wanted you to see the iterations you can go through in one problem. You think you solve a problem in a year, but no, it was many years and minimum of 3 iterations, if not more, before we got something that teams actually wanted to consume. Okay, so that was all about an iterative project with a dev team. But in a general way, we have this big problem in our global society today that people are distributed, right? Everybody's going to work in a distributed way. You might not believe me now, but you will work in a distributed way at some point in your lives. And it's hard when you're the distributed person. I don't know how many of you have Skyped into a big meeting before, but there are many things that go wrong, and I'll get into exactly what those are in a minute. But there are a lot of pressures for us to build these teams despite all the problems they have. They're mostly economic, right? And what we really wanted to do was try to solve some of these geographically distributed team problems. So we've actually done some serious ethnography on this problem, as have other people like Andy Coe at the University of Washington and several of our other colleagues. We see this in just regular meetings with our own team because we have many distributed members on our team now. Just communication in meetings, you get passed over. You just get passed over. If you're just on the phone, nobody remembers to let you talk. Doesn't matter if you had something important to say or not, you're not going to say it. Ad hoc conversations, well, you don't get to participate in them because you're not around, right? Staying aware, this is the one I hear the most from my distributed teammates. They don't know what's going on. They feel completely out of the loop. And it's hard to build trust when you don't know the social things that are going on in people's lives. You know, you don't know to say, oh, congratulations on that award, or oh, you know, I'm sorry to hear about what happened. So the common ground is kind of gone because of these last two things. And then, you know, there's always this worry that if we build tools that log you and show you what's going on with the remote participant, that they're going to be evaluated by how hard they're working because you're monitoring them. And remote employees, because they may be from another culture, may not know what group norms are. Like it might be A-okay in your work group to do something, like, you know, go play. We have a lot of games in MSR, like foosball or something. And maybe, you know, if another culture sees that they're off playing foosball, it's like completely inappropriate, right? And so it's really hard to know what's appropriate and what's not. And then, you know, another question people have asked us is, what is a distributed team? It should be easy to answer that, right? But it kind of depends on how you define it. So there's been research on this. I had to laugh. We have a bunch of HCI colleagues in Eric Horvitz's group, and my HCI folks, and we all co-located with the lab in between us. And there's tons of collaboration. Well, they got this idea that they wanted to move, and it would be no problem because, you know, they're just moving to the other side of the same floor. They had more windows there and better, like, hangout space. Well, 20 feet makes a huge difference in collaboration. Your likelihood of collaborating goes down as soon as you move 20 feet away. And it gets worse and worse when you start talking about it in a different building, on a different floor, but worse if you're in another city, worse if you're in another country. So it just gets worse and worse and worse. And you know, all the studies that have shown that, you know, if you're closer to your colleague, you're more likely to communicate, especially effectively. So Andy Coe did some research looking at you know, just ad hoc conversations and what's the benefit of just bumping into a colleague and what you don't get when you don't get those. And in his research, he shows that for dev teams, these are the kinds of questions that tend to come up in the ad hoc conversations. So these are the things that the remote employees don't get to find out about, okay? Because they're just literally not able to have ad hoc conversations. And it's going down in terms of frequency of which he saw these kinds of questions come up. And what Latoza found in an internship with us is that face-to-face is really the most preferred way people like to get answers to these questions. You can get more meat, more bang for your buck quickly in face-to-face. This is why everyone who's been meeting with me knows that I'm a huge fan of video in the future. I think video is going to be way more important than any text very soon now, because it's just so much richer. And sometimes using a secondary media, like taking the face-to-face and looking at a screen, or taking the face-to-face and going and doing something together, is also a really rich way to solve problems. And these are things the remote participants don't get to do. Now, I see a lot of like architects at Microsoft doing tons of IM, but when it's a really, really hard problem, he stops the IM and he says, come to my office, and they whiteboard. It's just, that's the way it happens. And so again, the reason video is going to be huge is because you can do that in video, and you can't do that in text. So the visual channel is huge. And then email, of course, is the communication workhorse, but sometimes you need to migrate to other media, like we were just saying. Okay, and Coe goes on to say how many sources people tap into to answer questions. So they monitor all these resources to answers to these questions. I think my next slide shows one of these. Yeah, these are all the online resources that teammates and dev teams will monitor. So you can imagine, you know, if you come up with a tool that integrates all these sources into one centralized visualization, it would be huge for these people. But the remote people have to do this way, way more than the non-remote people because they don't have the face-to-face channel. So basically, this slide summarizes what we've seen as why remote team members are at such a disadvantage in team awareness, group productivity, really knowing what's going on, and therefore being more effective in their solutions and decisions. In teleconference, I don't know how many people have tried to set up teleconferences in a very rich way, but I just did this at the CHI-PC meeting and tried to get Ken Hinckley set up with a ring cam so we could see everyone around the table, high quality audio, really high quality video, got him a high quality mic on the other end and headphones. It took all morning, but I will say, once we got him set up, it was the best remote team participant we had at the table. Because guess what everybody else was doing? Here's my cell phone. I can't hear you. What? Here, take the cell phone, pass it down. And that was really bad. So the setup is terrible, but once you get it right, it's much better. And no whiteboarding in most of the tools. And then the ad hoc that we've talked about missing. A really important one is time zones. So a lot of Microsoft devs stay up till midnight to have teleconference with Shanghai, for instance. And the work-life boundaries that get really, really violated are huge. And in China, they will get up at the crack of dawn. I've had mentees of mine, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And they have little kids, and I don't think that's okay. So, these are the kinds of problems we're trying to solve. So these are the folks that are working on, we call them actuated or social proxies. Gina Vanolia, George Robertson, actually that's George in a box, and that's John in a box, John Tang. They're both remote employees of mine, and they feel this pain on a daily basis, so we build building solutions to help them. So one of the things we thought is, okay, we've built them up with these great carts, right? They're movable. As I was telling some of you guys at lunch, a really important feature that anyone in a wheelchair knows about is you can move them up if they're standing up next to you and talking, or you can move them down if they're sitting at the table. Now we've got them so that they can actually get better gaze tracking, so you actually kind of know who they're looking at, and in fact, it's really creepy because now we have Kale in a box and they're all in the same office. And so sometimes I'll come in and they're all three talking from their carts. And it's just bizarre. But it's very effective for them. They all have whiteboards that is their whiteboard that they can turn and look at. And now we're making it so that we're looking at movable parts, and you'll see in a minute, so they can be more like real versions of themselves. But the gaze tracking was huge because you really literally couldn't, if you were sitting around a table, you couldn't tell who George was talking to sometimes. Or sometimes he was actually looking at a screen and you thought he was talking to you, so that was a good thing for him to solve. And so the idea here is the satellite teammate is roughly human scale and has a seat at the table. Here you can see him at seated side. And he's always visible, so the hub teammates can see his reaction. And when you're on your satellite side, you have multiple cameras. So you have one that's just a regular remote control pan tilt camera, and you can look at the whiteboard, the slides, etc. But then you have a wide angle too, so you can see the whole room. And that's where the gaze direction part really becomes important. Now we've built these slabs that they rotate, so they're mechanized. So George literally, instead of turning within the stable monitor, now literally can turn, look at you and turn. You can imagine, I think I have a video of this, that it may or may not be a good idea. Okay. This guy actually, this student, David Sirkin, I think he's at Stanford, had done a robotic arm that you hang on the proxies, and so they can point to things, which he actually did show was really useful. Hold on a minute. Let me see if I can show you a little video of this. I might have to talk over it. How do I get there? Thought I left it right where the video was. Sorry. Oh, I did. Okay. So basically, he's sitting, and there's a camera tracking his face, and you can see his proxy is moving as he turns his head. So if he wants to turn in a room with a circular group of people, he turns his head, and it tracks his face and his eyes, and it moves the monitor in accordance with his movements. Okay, so who thinks this is going to be a good idea? Yeah? Okay. What we found was in a user study, and in fact I experienced it myself right after they finished the user study, and it was like very apparent to me after they did the study. It's rude. So if you're sitting around a table and the social proxy is here and it was talking to you, and then George says something over here and it goes, and you're looking at the back of its head. You're like, hey, what about me? Plus you can't see their expressions. So it's like, okay, that didn't work. Back to the drawing board. So now, we're really looking at a bunch of other ideas that are similar to that, but not as rude. And there are still some people that love it. I mean, that love the slab moving around like that. It used to be the ring cam would have that problem too, because when people would walk into the room or something, it would hear, because it's got audio detection, it would hear something happened over there, and the ring cam would go, and go look at it, and I'd be like, what happened? So we had to turn that sound down. So we did run a study of this, and we had a bunch of hypotheses that the physical motion would be better than no motion, and that implicit control by moving your face would actually be better than explicitly controlling it. And we had 6 groups of 3 participants come in and try it out with 1 confederate. And I'm surprised they actually found these social cues were broken even with just 3. We saw it with like a table of 8. It was really bad. So they collected subjective and objective measures. But motion is promising is what we found, but you shouldn't hide the screen from participants in a meeting. And so they've got some ideas. I'm not really sure what that picture is supposed to be for me, but maybe we should try a mixed control mode where you don't turn your back on anybody, but you kind of get closer to who you're talking at. And we've talked about having multiple displays in the room, and maybe depending on where you're sitting, it can be better. So we're going to try lots of different things. As I was telling some of you today, there are a ton of startups, and there's a ton of news in this space. So we've been going down and looking at some of these guys with the intention of buying some of them to see what it's like if George is actually a robot, and he's walking side by side with me and we're talking. And, does that help at all? We can actually do that with the cart now because it's wireless. You can actually talk to George as you take him to meetings and stuff. It's still a pain to take George and John and Kale to meetings because someone physically has to haul the cart, and you feel so bad if you forget to bring them to the meeting. And then one time George told me, or John told me, he was left in a meeting and everybody left, and he's like, guys, somebody take me back to the office. And he said some poor soul walked by and saw him and asked him what was wrong and took him to his office. So, there is a little bit of this anthropomorphism going on. But you can see, all the different variations here. Some of the things we've noticed that I discussed with some of you guys at lunchtime was some of the robots that they're building, the faces are way too little if they're doing any video. And we've found the human scale is really important. Getting too big is bad. Getting too little is bad. So you need to be human scale, and you also need to be human height. So the first obvious thing everyone thought about was using a Roomba, and putting George on it and just letting him find his way to the meeting somehow. But he was too low, and so everybody would trip over him and stuff. So we're still playing in this space, and we will get several robots in and keep doing these experiments. But we think they have to be human scale. And there's a lot we still need to learn about audio and video. Oh, I know what I'm forgetting to say. We learned that it's really hard to know what you look like when you're a proxy on the other end. Like, you don't know how loud you are, and you don't know, have they done something to distort your image? Do you look ridiculous? I used the example of, I just did a PhD dissertation over Skype in the Netherlands, and Aga said, oh, you look great, And then later I saw a picture of me on Facebook at the dissertation committee meeting, and I was on a screen this big, and the camera was going straight up my nose. I had no idea. So we still need to do better feedback on the remote side that they are being represented in a really good way. And it wasn't Aga's fault, obviously. She was worried about her dissertation defense. So I love this quip from Gina. Don't anthropomorphize computers. They hate that. Okay. We're doing lots of other stuff in this space. I don't know how I'm doing on time.
It's like 20 after something.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So because of this big problem with really truly distributed teams where there's a severe shift in time zones, like 12 hours, we've been doing all kinds of stuff about how you use social media tools, email, and video to allow remote people to participate better in meetings. So I can envision a day when you are actually just sending video of yourself and it gets inserted at the right time in a meeting. But then you get to hear how people reacted back over video. So we're doing a lot to make video more of a first-class citizen so that people do see your representation and how you feel about a topic instead of you know, IMing as the meeting's going on or just getting passed over audio-wise. And so there are a lot of things I think we can do around time-shifted collaboration, and Gina and John and Corey are the main researchers working on this stuff, and they've got some really great ideas, you know, including using avatars. We did some research looking at what are you okay with yourself looking at if it's not if it's not video. Like, are you okay with an Xbox 3D avatar? You know, and actually what we found is people were really okay being cartoonized. In fact, some of those Xbox avatars make me look way cooler than I look myself. And so in many cases, if you're just out of the shower, just crawled out of bed to do a video conference or something, you might prefer, you know, a 3D avatar that looked really good in the morning than what you actually look like. So people seem to be fine with that as long as you don't distort their real image. They really don't like anything that distorts images. So a lot of researchers in this area did all this work to like clean up your skin or erase your messy desk behind you or smooth out your hair. And you know, there was a lot of work like to get the lighting right. People just really didn't care too much as long as you don't like blur their image or distort their face. I think Sheila actually did some work on that at once too, or Beth Minor did, I can't remember, but distortion isn't good. Okay, so what we've done is we've kind of started to explore some ways we can address all these negatives about being a remote employee on a hub and satellite team. The ones we've bolded here, we feel like we're starting to get better at. So with George and John and Cale in the box, Cale is the only one that actually leaves himself on all the time, and we make a lot of jokes because he's always working really hard. But he's on the beach in North Carolina, and every day it's really sunny days, so we're like, he's on loop. We know he's on loop. But no, he's always there working, and he really likes, he asked us to put him in the hallway so that as we walk up and down the hallway, and he does, because he stays on all the time, he gets that ad hoc conversation. He's the only one of the three of them that does. So he solved that problem himself. But the setup for all of them is real easy now. Everything's wireless. We got it down to $1,000. The only problem is moving them and forgetting them. I think that because of the quality of the video and the audio, they can interject when they want to. And actually, in a way, they have a little bit of priority in interjecting because they can make noise, weird noise. And it gets our attention. But also we can see them, so we can see their cues about they're trying to say something, and it gives them a voice at the table. But there are still some things that we haven't really solved. One of the issues with time zones that we're having a big problem with the distributed teams at Microsoft is that they already have decided it's okay to violate work-life boundaries, and they're already doing that because they have to. And we need to find teams that haven't started yet, so we don't have to try to get in the way of their already existing practices of staying up till midnight or getting up at 4 in the morning. So we still have some work to do, and I think getting the robots in is going to be a lot of fun. Oh, and AJ did some work showing, these proxies actually help teams that aren't distributed as well. So Corey is often in another building, and she said, I just want a box that anyone can inhabit. Could you just put it in the design studio space? And I'm like, sure. So now whoever needs to be in a box can go in that box. And so it is actually nice, and we've done some research showing that even a few steps away can get in the way of a less than 5-minute walk can get in the way of your ad hoc communication with your team. So just having a proxy sitting around that we can inhabit seems to be a good idea. Now, we do have visualization and interaction for business and entertainment. So I should talk about the E side of the house. Corey has little kids, and she often has friends with little kids, and because of their crazy life, they can't get the little kids together. So maybe, we could do proxies of little kids. So we did these projects called Video Playdate. Corey and AJ did this together. And they worked at a lot of different configurations of technology that might allow kids to play creatively together. The idea is creatively, because we know that's good for the kids. Less TV, less that kind of stuff, and more actually playing with each other. So they did a bunch of experiments looking at this. The first prototype was just regular video conferencing. And even here, we saw issues with screen size and screen position. So kids had a really hard time if the screen was down too low or up too high on a table. So it had to be kid height, whatever it was, to make it work even a little bit. But that was by far, in a way, the worst condition. Then they got this pan zoom tilt prototype, where the researcher can kind of play choreographer or cinematographer for the kids, so that they make sure that the kids are always on screen, in view, and then they use some projection to show shared artifacts. They used a mobile prototype. This is interesting. These mobile prototypes are going to be really important. They might just be phones, or they might be slates of some kind that end up doing this kind of functionality. But the kids want to take their friends around and show them their environment, or what they've built, or what they've drawn. It's really important to them, their room, what they've done in their room. And so something mobile seems to be really important. As we work with video, especially with kids are so creative and prolific with video, even as young as 3rd grade, but 6th graders are crazy good. We gave 6th graders some video prototyping tools to just do conversations in videos. And I think in 24 hours, there's something like 600 videos amongst 4 or 5 6th grade girls. Crazy. But they love it, and they find it very natural to work together that way and to play together that way. But the mobile component was really important. And then this projector rug prototype was really great. So the kids have a common space that they play together on that's projected down onto the floor, while the experimenter does the pan tilt cinematography stuff. That was the best condition, and they were the most engaged in that condition and played longer, more creatively in that condition. So that was great. So we'll continue working in the home. In fact, in Desney's group, Dan Morris did a really nice music prototype. They've done DJ tools. So we do have a lot of entertainment stuff going on, but since I was on a video theme, I thought I'd stay there. Okay, I told you we do a lot of logging. Andy Bagel in our group, with the work of Thomas Zimmerman over in Wolfram's group, was really into doing Facebook for programmers. And I'm just real briefly going to show you what this might be like. It's basically social networking over code. I showed you in Andy Coe's work how many repositories developers try to keep up with to get team awareness. Well, this tool is really supposed to help them do that. It's like your Facebook feed, but it's relevant to your project, right? And these are the kinds of questions that Andy wanted to help them ask. It's really about people, like who's the best person to talk to about this area of the code? Or where is the artifact that I'm looking for? Why was this change made? And developers on teams come and go pretty rapidly. And with them goes really amazing amounts of knowledge until we start to store and historically trend and analyze these kinds of databases. And so the idea is to relate people and artifacts to the code. And this is a very old prototype version. He's actually working very hard to make this real now to deploy with our Bing team. And the idea here is he searched on foo, and what he got back was the program managers that worked on foo, the developers that worked on it, features, bugs, tasks, classes, and methods. So anything he could suck up across this huge social graph of artifacts and people, he'll show on the overview page when you search. But then there could also be codebook feeds that are relevant to whatever it is that you're doing, and it might be the people that you should be most likely talking to, or customers, or whatever it might be. But you can see how this would be really useful to a real team developing real products and needing to talk to people, ad hoc, face to face, but in a timely way. So he is getting ready to deploy this with a huge team. It's very scary, actually, because the Bing team, you know, they turn new features and stuff around like really fast. You cannot get in their way with broken prototype code. So Andy's very nervous about doing this deployment in a very high quality, big way, and the team seems to be extremely welcoming of him doing this, so we'll see how it goes. Next time I talk to you, we'll tell you how that works. But Andy says some things I think are very important to kind of end with on this topic. You know, work networking is not the same as social networking. It's not the same as doing Facebook, right? Individual values might conflict with team values. Even on Facebook, you see people do things, you're like, oh God, I wouldn't do that. Well, you know, that could be way more exacerbated in a team setting. And intellectual property leaks are huge at Microsoft. I mean, you could not let something like that happen because that could cost you your job. And then a lot of people don't think it's okay for, you know, the corporation to be surveilling you to some degree. So tracking all that stuff might actually make someone feel uncomfortable. But the thing is, and we know this on my team because we do so much logging, if you opt out, you will miss out on getting all that information, but also it doesn't work as well for the whole team because you're only getting partial team information. So it's not as easy to do this in work as it would be just socially. Okay, any questions on that? Because I'm going to shift gears to more disruptive technology and wrap up. No? Okay. My group does a ton of stuff in HCI, okay, across the board, from speech to 3D UI to you know, working with people who do language translation. I've already talked to you about video. A ton of stuff going on with sensors and continuous sensing. And of course, contextual awareness and the ability to identify tasks has been the holy grail of my team for a long, long time. But the most important thing I see coming down the pipe, breathing at us, is the thing that keeps me up at night, is all this information coming at us as we wear all these sensors and as we videotape our lives and everything's logged. How are we going to visualize? You know, and it's all up in the cloud across all our devices. How are we going to build user interfaces for that so that it makes us feel calm and not stressed out, doesn't violate privacy, and is secure? So this is the hard task. We're doing a lot of work looking at how workflow cuts across devices. So we built a logger that logs all your interactions on all your devices. Anything you check into the system, it will log it. And so now we can keep track of everything you do on all your devices. We can visualize that for you. And why is that useful? Well, you could bubble up metadata like, oh, this email, you read it on your mobile phone. That might be important. This email, you know, you kind of scantily processed it because it was on your phone. That's one way of thinking about that. Or because what we saw was people tended not to follow up on email on their phone, but they followed up when they got back to their PC. So maybe you want to visualize that so they remember to do it. Lots of little things like that we can do, but also some bigger things. Because if you had a common infrastructure across all these devices, they could know when they're in the vicinity of each other. And AJ did some great work, I think it was last summer, where if you made a phone call, like say to order a pizza, but your device knew that you were next to your big display, well, shouldn't it know it's next to your big display? And maybe it can show you a map of how to get to the pizza place, or maybe the pizza place could send you a coupon that you could print out. And it was all a handshake because you called the place. It allowed you to do certain kinds of operations. And I think we have tons of opportunity in the space of allowing devices to all know about each other and assist your tasks on the display or device that makes sense to do the task on. So we got a lot of work in that area. Of course, NUI is the big buzzword out there. And of course, since Minority Report came out, people have been trying to do it more and more. But the time has come where you actually don't have to wear anything anymore. And Craig Mundy has been going around, you know, talking about surfaces and natural user interfaces for a long, long time. And so I don't know if any of you have Connects, but Project Natal was born because, you know, a lot of people saw this vision. The vision was a joint vision between product and research, and this was one of those very unique moments where the time had come that you could do these things, but it needed a lot of different technologies and research to come together to make it happen. And then it needed a product team that knew how to ship it. Then you had to put it all together and ship it. And I can tell you that there was real trepidation in the researchers that it wasn't going to be perfect, it wasn't going to be okay. And the practice was just like, ship it, work hard, ship it. And they shipped it, and it's really fun. And I think one of the things that game changed that whole project was when the game developers really figured out, oh, this has to be sloppy and look like it's really good, you know? So that it's not going to be perfectly correct, but it must make you feel like you did it perfectly, you know? And once they started developing the games like that, I heard that you know, it shipped very easily because they designed the games to sort of correct for the fact that the audio and the vision systems were still misrecognizing a little bit, and it was okay. But to do that for, you know, someone this big to someone this big to this far away versus that far away, that was a real challenge, and I was really proud of all the researchers and product folks that worked on that. But you can imagine now what the future is going to be with things like Connect when you think about your office space. Many years ago, we did step mail. I don't know if any of you remember that, but we used a Dance Dance Revolution pad to do your email. And so you got to get exercise, and we showed you burned like 250 calories deleting your mail. You know, you got to do really fun things like forward, you know, and it kind of looked like a horse sometimes. But it was kind of fun. Like it felt good to delete the email, you know? And you felt like you were making progress and getting exercise. And that was actually born out of AJ. I think she had a little baby at the time, and she couldn't do her email because she didn't have her hands. And so she wanted a way where she could use her feet. So you can imagine things like this in the future for real productivity work, all joking aside. I think there are things we could do that, you know, would be a little bit more fun, and you're not just sitting at your desk crouched over like this, you know, but actually standing up straight and maybe not getting as much RSI. So Desney's group has been doing some of these kinds of dreamy, wacky, way out technologies. Chris Harrison was an intern with us at the time. And they did skin put, and the idea was to wear these sensors on your arm, and then when you tapped your arm, they used bioacoustic sensors, and they could tell where you were tapping, and you could do all kinds of interesting things UI-wise, like dial a phone, because they had a little Pico projector on your arm. You could dial a phone or go through menus and things like that. And then if you think about like marrying something like a surface knowing where you are in 3D space, where you're hovering, versus also having these sensors on your arms, you could do all kinds of really neat things multimodally. You know, it could know how hard you're pressing, which finger it is. They did a lot of work with the bioacoustic sensors to see which finger you were actually tapping. You can play Tetris this way. And you know, they've even done crazy things, and I don't think I have pictures of it here, but they have developed a retainer. So you can do tongue-based interaction. And it turns out the tongue's actually a really big muscle. And they got it to a point where Greg and my group could actually drive his wheelchair with the retainer, which is pretty cool. And so, you know, they're looking at bionic eyes and stuff like that for projection. But I envision my group to do many more things in this direction with sensors and novel interaction. And I think I'll close here. This was a surface, and I thought I had a video of it, but it seems to not be playing. You can get it on YouTube. It's called Cambiera. And it was designed for visual analytics. I was telling Brian about this. It was a way for two analysts to look at way too many documents than either one of them would have time for, but to solve really hard, challenging problems like public health issues, like a breakout of, you know, what was it called, BSA, you know, mad cow disease. And two people would have to be searching through these documents at the same time, but they would need awareness of who was looking for what. And the Cambiera system used color coding and spatial proximity and orientation to show who was trying to solve which problem. And it was funny because when we ran these experiments, the table was very low resolution. You could see it's small. And so the issues we saw back then were people wanted more grouping and more ability to cluster things and so on. And of course, we need to do that. But I was more interested in, would it build trust between two visual analysts? So if you read that paper, well, now I don't have to read it because I trust you. But in fact, that wasn't the case. So even if someone knew that you had read a paper, they still might go read it because they think they'd get more out of it or you missed something. It kind of depended on the team, but definitely you need tools to take that kind of thing into account. We hadn't expected that. But we did some really interesting studies. This got a Best Paper Award recently. Petra Isenberg was the intern that did all of this work. Oh, I can't show that. So that's it. Thank you very much. I hope you have fun.
So we definitely have some time for questions. I will just take this moment of pause if people know that they have to leave. We'll give a 10-second break, and then please feel free to ask your questions. Okay, so I think we'll start the questions.
Yeah, I remember in the first, very beginning, you mentioned that distributed teams are missing out on after conversations. And now, no video can solve it, because these conversations often happen quite randomly at times. They were not planned. They're not like during a meeting.
Right.
I was wondering, what do you think might be the solution to that? Because it's not like somebody's going to join and let's do an after conversation now.
Right.
Just repeating that for the...
I'm not sure I can repeat it perfectly, but I think the question was about ad hoc meetings. They tend to happen when they're not planned, so how can you use video to serendipitously have an ad hoc meeting when you don't know that you would have had one anyway? I think that was the question. That's why we're working with video to become more like email. So when you send an email, you know you need the answer to that, right? If you start using video more socially, like I'm just going to throw a crazy idea out there, and you allow for really easy ways for people to reply with video, more ad hoc conversations are going to happen because people are going to see that stuff go by. So we saw that with like group IM, chat, with dev teams. Their email actually went down when other team members could see who was talking about what. That happened in FastDash actually, but it happened in another tool we did which was more IM based. There would be lurkers, and they would just watch and listen and learn. And then when they felt comfortable, and sometimes it was after 3 weeks, they would act. Like, okay, I'm good enough, I can jump in here now, or something like that. And so it was ad hoc, but it was only because they waited until they felt like, okay, now I need something, right? So you're not going to get that kind of ad hoc unless you've got a bunch of boxes and they're all looking at each other in a room. You're not going to get that kind of ad hoc communication unless you choose to do what Kale does, which is to stay on all the time and stay in the hallway. I mean, he purposely said, I want to be in the hallway. He gave up his window office to be in the hallway. So when he comes back, he's nowhere to sit. But I think that's really the only true way, unless we come up with really good proxies of you that people can leverage anytime they want. We've talked about doing that too. Good question. Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that we can access the materials you presented today online or?
Yeah, we publish everything we do. So if you go to our website, the Vibe website, if you go to Visualization and Interaction Research off the MSR homepage, all our papers are there. And usually the videos as well. So yeah, they're fun to go through slowly. And I had video problems today, so I didn't show you nearly as much as I should have. Help yourself. Yeah?
I like you've touched a bit the problem of the time zone,
Yeah.
and that how do you manage to interact with people which are on the other side of the world, and that problem with work-life boundary, where how can you abolish that abolition of...
Yeah, no, I'm very concerned about that actually. I think once a group already gets familiar and comfortable doing it, it's really hard for them to be convinced that you don't have to work that way. That's been our experience. So when we install, we've got 2 more video tools that we've since installed, since what I showed you, to help that problem. But they're like, well, I don't want to learn a whole new tool when we already know that if I stay up till midnight, we have a very good live meeting, right? So you have to fit into their current existing work practices, is my mantra. So if we can find a new team that hasn't developed those existing work practices, we can teach them new ones. And then they don't have to violate work-life boundaries. But if they're already convinced that they have to violate them, it's going to be really hard to change their work practices, unfortunately. I mean, you would think, you know, the people with children who have to get up at 4 in the morning would be totally happy to try your new tool, but maybe expectations are there already, and there's a culture set already that makes it very hard. We're still going to try, but it is hard. Big question.
So, on the just putting people in a box, you know, the little phase that we went. So I spent some time at Willow Garage, and they've got the robots that go around. And I was really struck, this was a couple of years ago, maybe 1 year ago, at the height's incredibly important.
I know.
And being able to go up and down and sit down at the desk with you, but also walk through the halls with you. But the setup they have is actually remote control, so that the robot is under the remote participant's control, and they can move themselves around. They can be in charge of navigating when they're walking next to you down the hall.
Yeah.
And it made that. I mean, you were talking about the other case where they don't have that power, and the difference in empowerment is quite substantial, I think.
I think so too.
Is that something that you're going to be investigating?
Well, that's why we're looking at buying robots, so we can do that. We actually, Greg had an extra wheelchair, and we talked about instrumenting it so they can move. We still have this problem that in 99, you need to operate the door handles to get into the rooms. So it doesn't actually solve a problem that, even if they were robots, it doesn't solve the problem of them getting into the room. So they'd still need someone to open the door. But it would be a huge empowerment to them to be able to go wherever they wanted to go, when they wanted to go. They probably still wouldn't be able to leave the building very easily.
Or go up and down the stairs.
But they could use the elevators, as long as someone pressed the button for them. But some of the robots have arms, so yeah, it's definitely something we'll be looking at.
Would be a great Monty Python movie.
I just want there to be more robots than people actually in Building 99. I think that day would be really cool. I'm not like a huge fan of replacing people with robots by any stretch of the imagination, but I just want to see socially what would happen, to the one person that's left. I just want to study that person. Yes.
That's very interesting. I'm going to ask if you're planning to study the psychological impact that this technology will give people, because it's kind of like a technology that people will feel more like a disabled person.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than, the ability that it gives, it's not clear that it's more than the disability that the people.
That's a great question. The question was, do these boxes make them feel more like a disabled person? I took out last night one study that I should have left in because it would have answered that question, and I was relating the chair height as a wheelchair issue. In fact, what happened was just the opposite. So we studied several teams, Gina, John, and I can't remember who was all involved in this project. But they studied several hub and satellite teams, and we had a Chi paper on this last year. And what they found was the satellite member was extremely underappreciated and not respected. And in one particular case that I'll just tell you the story about, because it's a personal story, this was an architect down in Silicon Valley who was really good and had been working remotely with this other team in Redmond, and the team did not appreciate him. They did not think he worked hard. He was not asked questions that he could easily answer, and we got him a box. And They said all of a sudden, when he was at meetings and they saw how engaged he was and how knowledgeable he was and he was working hard, and pretty soon they were buying him donuts in the morning and leaving donuts at his box, and they had hats on him and I think a beard, and he was, the change in their respect for him and his feeling of inclusion on the team was enormous. And they will say that, on every team you interview, but this particular case really struck me because he was such a valuable asset, but they didn't really appreciate it. So I don't think they feel like that at all. I think it's the opposite. They feel, it's back to the empowerment issue. I think they feel empowered finally that, yeah, this is who I am. I'm really a person,
So one of the things that struck me from a really high level from your talk is that I would say maybe the first 85% of it was about teams and collaboration and collaboration technologies or CSCW. And is that representative of the full body of work going on in your team, or is that more just what you chose to focus on because you obviously had to select?
Yeah, that's why I ended with what I did, because there's work going on in the entire space of HCI. Social computing, analytics, you name it. But I did this to kind of show what a long, iterative body of work looks like when you work across multiple teams and you focus on one area, how you don't get anything right the first time. And it takes years and years of effort to see what actually matters, what values people have around the technology. So it's a very deep dive for us, both the dev teamwork and the distributed teamwork. But there's tons of other stuff going on in the group. So I can't possibly talk about it all in a cohesive way.
No, but it wouldn't surprise me if you said overall you're kind of the work is somewhat shifting towards the group technologies.
In two of the groups
it's really pervasive now, whereas it was kind of Chi and then CSCW. I mean, CSCW as an area is just, I think with the interconnected world.
Exactly. I think with the growth of logging, sensing, big displays, and time zone shifts, everybody's realizing that we have to solve these problems, right? And it's important to Microsoft as a company, but many other companies are focused on this too. Cisco, HP, Skype, look at Skype. So it's a big problem, but no, we've got people very focused on mobile. We've got people very focused on the home, people very focused on creativity tools and sensing, continuous sensing. So, and people even doing search, so the whole gamut.
I guess you have you started your work in academia and then moved on to industry research labs. And I guess as a person you visit a lot of university labs and industry labs as well. So what do you think is the key difference between research that goes on in industry labs versus university labs?
Oh, that's interesting. It's changed a lot in recent past. I would have said, 15 years ago that university research was so much more free and long-term. But now the grant situation has become such that in certain places it's really not. It's like what you got your grant for, and it's very short-term, and the grants are shorter-term and smaller. And it's all in the noise. It's very hard to get grants now. So the freedom in my lab, and I can't speak for every industrial lab in this way, is I don't have to ask for money to do anything. I can do whatever I want. Now, it behooves me to try to solve problems that are important to the company. I wouldn't feel good about myself if I didn't do some problem solution that in the future could, help our industry, our HCI field, or Microsoft, But I try to start with real user problems and go there, but that's an HCI researcher's perspective. But we have a very free agenda. We can do as short or as long-term as we want. And some people love working on short-term problems because you can ship them directly. And then some people, like Desney's group, we the tongue-based interface and all that stuff. You know, they clearly are not on a direct product path, right? So we have the freedom to do whatever we want because we don't have to get grant money. We can also teach, and obviously public services, Joanna emphasized. So we can choose how we want to spend our time. And academia has tons of freedom too, but there's the grant writing side of it that I think, it makes it very hard to get the funding to do the big things you want to do sometimes. But Canada seems very well funded, so you guys are in good shape.
That doesn't seem
I don't think I'll take that one on.
It seems like you guys are doing what you want to do. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Ryan, take it away.
When you showed them the Microsoft Connect, and there's some kind of funny videos floating around
Yeah.
of people inadvertently being kicked and punched and by folks. So,
Yeah.
has there been any interesting research in how to kind of constrain the user to prevent those kinds of things from coming up?
Well, as a single user, they constrain you in terms of where you're going to be recognized the best, and they use interesting feedback to do that. My living room is too short, technically, for my Connect, so I tend to more kick the couch than kick another person, because I do my workouts now with Connect, and it tracks my physical fitness and stuff. But yeah, when you have a group of people, there's no true like boundaries projected for you to know that you're not going to smack that person or whatever the activity is you're doing. You can see yourself, and you can see the other people and where they are in location to you on the screen. So if you're a careful person, you would use that feedback. But people get really, I mean, that's a testimony for Connect and how engaged people get, because they do smack each other, because they're really into it. So, you know, I think it's just game by game. It's very different. But I've been to many dance parties, and it's so much fun. You don't really care if you bump into each other, because everybody's dancing. You feel like you got backup singers. It's really fun. It's a great thing to try to do. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to give that kind of feedback so people don't get hurt. We definitely should.
Last question. All right, Tamara, you go last.
I'm curious about the methodological spectrum of the folks that you hire, right? Because you talked about there's building things, there's trying to figure out a lot of very qualitative things.
Yeah.
So does your group now have a mix of co-developers, people with explicit ethnographic training, people who've learned it along the way? How
Yeah.
does that all work together when
Yes.
you decide? Do you have a good rule of thumb for, you know, getting things kind of, do you always, you know, lab first and then field? Do you do a mix depending on the project?
Yeah. I'm pretty much of an ethnography person to start. Like, I like to see the problems in the real world. But surveys can be very useful for that as well, or previous studies other people have done that you can learn from and start building from, right? But the first question you asked, the group is made of many disciplines of people, from hardware people who love to tinker and solder and all that stuff, to people who are pure qualitative scientists and social scientists. But I would say even the social scientists now, their data set is huge. They're having to do the kinds of statistics and methods that they were never trained to do. They have to learn as they go. Just think of a Twitter feed and what it takes to clean that data and analyze it and then do something with it that's relevant to the end user. The amount of data we have sitting at our fingertips at Microsoft right now is huge. Bing data, Twitter data, Facebook data even. I mean, it's crazy. So we're all having to learn new research methods. I'm having to learn new research methods. But we try to hire, you know, right now for me, machine learning is really important. And health is really important. Economy is really important. So the more disciplines you get around yourself, the higher the probability that you can do something game-changing and really new. So we hire strategically in that way, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, we all have to learn new things as we go, because everything changes, right? And the methods you use, I mean, it used to be when I was a cognitive psychologist and I first started in HCI, this was all you had to know, right? Maybe this. But now it's all different. So good question. But yeah, we try to get as many different kinds of people around us as we possibly can.
So on that note, let's
Thank you
once
very
again,
much,
please.
guys. Last night what I did, I must not have been very coherent. I tried to give myself time to make sure it was smoothed out, but I put things in the wrong order, in fact. So I put all the video stuff before COVID, and I don't know how I did that. I was like, when I started with that. So hopefully it's coherent.
Well, I didn't know this.
Okay.
So I don't know what that says about me or that.
And then there were all these experiments that we talked about that didn't put in, so I just winged it. It's like, oh yeah, Gail, of course. Yes, of course I know you.
high person. What I do mind is like just trying to get paper distance. I mean, this, again, we talked through 3 minutes. Let's just try to make paper. Oh, yeah. Just, well, I mean, I would say that, typically, highly cited ones actually do have there's proof, right? People deliver results. And keep in mind, sometimes it's a direct application, other times it's a tool for other people to use. So there's a level of indirection there. But it's basically part of the chain. So in that sense, not everybody has to do it. But I do think you want to think about funny thing is, I sometimes, but I don't really follow change my stuff. I still do not much. Because I think myself as more technical, right? And it's just because to me it's like an Excel study X. So, like I could consider, okay, I'm primarily say an attention researcher first, which is important. Others would be, well, like myself, like I'm a tool builder for attention people. They're not exclusive. The thing is, both cases, it's just so that you contribute. It's only if you're trying to sort of access a publication for the sake of it. Because I think there's a fair number of like this, and I really think it's a waste of everybody's time.
It'll be again the 80-20 thing.
Yeah.
20%
Yeah, in fact, you can even do it a couple times. You get a 50 and 1, so 1%, basically half of it. Like even things like, say, you get actually a tool builder. So nice, that actually is like a crosswalk thing if you think about it. That's why you can jump across different areas. But I actually do some, you'll see, I'll actually read some papers. I do some cool stuff. And I only talk to these 1% like an right near that group, right? So I always figure, I don't have time to meet everybody. If I have dinner with these guys, actually,
research will actually end up being the 90% have a secret source.
yeah, well, okay. I mean,
I think it's true.
there's 2 views on that, right? Well, one is that it's kind of like, in some sense, 80-20 is the question is does it have to be that way? In other words, if you actually thought about it, everybody thought about it, we just still have 80-20. It's like we already thought about they did randomly, somebody did, and it seems the jury's out. Some people think, put it this way, some people think that you still have the 80-20, just a more effective 80-20, but it's still be 80-20. Other people actually think, no, it starts to flatten out, because in some sense you're filling up with the gaps. And I think the jury's still out. But either way, it still improves things. So even if you are in the 80%, it's not doing that. This is what you do, it still has an effect, right? There's an absolute as well as a relative. So the actually it's even more like everybody's still at 80%, at least they'll be more effective.
Started masters, I was so interested in company organization, but I mean, then they need a PhD.
Okay, then you need PhD. Yeah. Like I said, I've worked in several industries, and it's like she says, even with like what we do with Boeing, they say, what do? We try to do something to make them happy, but we have a lot of freedom. Nissan was the same way.
Get into take some of these things, and it's like, oh,
Because there's so much data. That you need to marry the user-specific machine management techniques. So, to me, you'll have no problem finding a job because it's just
Or you could go more abstract.
I wish it was too. That's all I can tell you. But yeah, you probably try to mix and see how
Okay.
I'll just research labs, doing courses, like office labs.
Get anything else from
A lot of people do research types of people started digging in and I'm not really Microsoft has chosen to very try not to create more like another event. Yeah, unfortunately, a couple of people dug in, but I just really what they, like I came really early, so.
Yeah, that's kind of bizarre that they would do
I'm thinking the pain of the time I will climb.
I was gonna say.
Someone realized that sounds good.
Those of us who are helping.
Oh, I know that's different. Which one was this one?
Hi, Mary. Good night. Thank you for your understanding.
The guy that I signed up for
Four is my favorite so far. First time's been like hell.
I see we have the emails, so like all the programs, all the working. So it's like,
Sally from the University of
she went to geography.
We have another
bunch
of them next year. This one? Yeah. And then you maybe sometime next week, and will help with that. No, we could. I still think divided. No, we're not allowed to have this. No, it's very basic, but I think it's validations permission, and unfortunately, I think Eric, we could have some of it, we could, yeah, some of that part. Extension of the course as well. We can't always
It's pretty obvious that
So it's just if you manage to think of a study where you design carefully enough that you actually publish it.
As some
That's true.
So whatever he wants to show us, like if he doesn't have IP issues, we can already see them.
Yeah, just Google him, just go to his website, to Eric's website.
It's hard to get
Yeah.
the results. Although that's why I
Yes.
like a position to begin with also.
Yeah, his website is, if
So
you
this
see
might work out too, might be
kept
great.
my
It's a
seminars
challenge.
announcement.
Yeah, no, I mean,
His homepage is right below his name. Okay, but you
Yeah,
know.
so I mean, the value has to match if it's worth it for the cost.
yeah, I mean, I kind of wish she,
Have a good evening.
like she has collaborated.
No problem, I was just, yeah, otherwise you have to just stand here.
Don't think that anything special. Maybe just a foreseen installation.
I'm not coordinating, but I am helping tonight. Jenny will just be on her way over to introduce herself. My name's Augustine. Hi. I'm Holly. Holly. It's nice to meet you.
Not really, but they might anyway.
No, not another topic. Yeah, your assistant. No, CS, computer science.
It's something to look at. It's,
Here. Oh, we're gonna let you. Oh. And I just wanted to say that yours came a bit earlier and people grabbed a couple of, no, but unfortunately aren't dug in. But I caught them before it was all gone. I think that it'll be fine. But such is life. I think, you got it. Okay, excellent. Thanks for letting me know. No, that's okay. It's Cisco that's coming, yeah. I've been work since. Oh, so. Well,
No, Olivia.
oh my gosh. Have a good. All right, you too. Bye. Bye.
My dad was a petroleum engineer. Oh, yeah. Software shit. What do you study? We're electrical. Software aspect of
No, me, I'm words, like, analysis.
so.
Me, no, I got it.
Yeah, I haven't seen you.
I was here last year.
what courses do you do for like while you're going?
Yes, it is. Just take a
And
seat.
mainly
I know, it was just.
did power courses. Like 4 or 5, 8, 4 or 5, 9,
What was your one?
196 is transmission. Transmission line.
How were your grades? Like the whole year? Or third quarter?
Third and fourth year is just like right above you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like trend, like how?
So what, man? So other embryologists do find that out. But like the way I can word it, you could look at it.
Not good enough.
Huh? Well, apparently it's not gonna happen. Like, I'm stretching the truth. That's like, yeah, but I put it on the work experience. And I put it under hydrogen and you see it is for hydrogen. Huh? It's not working. Because at the end, I actually had to like submit my report. This like nanometer special studies that I had. Marty. Oh, another guy might, but Marty. How do you guys know that?
So it's on your best friend on the Wow.
Second mouse. Yeah. So can you get any jobs in IT? Like for that?
Can I get any jobs?
Well, for us.
I don't have this connection.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know people that is. I'm not.
If not, like,
Yeah, if I don't know.
No, man, we're working the oil.
Yeah, they're not software jobs. Yeah, I'm not planning on working with this stuff.
You're not?
No. They probably don't know that go back there, but you make a lot of money.
That's true.
It's your taxes, right? So
That's true. Same with But you do it is comfort yourself.
How many browsers do you have?
I lost count. Like 100. No, dozens. Maybe 67.
Since you graduated? That's it?
That's a lot. 60, 70 jobs.
I'll do something like
It was something like ridiculous. 200, 400.
that's pretty ridiculous. Should probably actually send like.
Yes.
Or like.
But every job you remember, you have to like tell your job, every job, how to achieve the goal. Apparently, I'm starting to realize my taking this when the person like I've actually spoken to HR. She was speaking and she was like assessing my and I hence that she would give she's one of those I've yet to recall when they try to you gotta be a troublemaker. All the time.
Have you tried applying for internships?
They're actually because they want it. See, now, actually, figured out First, I think it's better. Best way to do it is actually that person. But you see, all this is I'll get back. Yeah, yeah. 30,000. But but you also get to like implement an idea.
want to start passing
You
this
want
around.
to process this idea. Like I'm better. Someone actually
Have you played?
it's one way to focus. You know what it is? It's this combination.
Like, core teams don't realize what a good voice can be. Because I was talking to this one guy, who's like, and we got into the conversation of thought, and I told him, he's like, whatever, I'm not that happy that I took it. And he's already got a draw lined up for the summer. What would happen? With different layers of the idea what this comes from. My plans to get involved with more than engineering. Just put it on the work, just to make things that people haven't
But you need experience.
That is experience. I was just at the junior the people from the electric car club, students that were in there, they were like third. They got dropped off directly stuff in the club. They didn't even come back to school. They just went to work $6,000.
They were bronze. Spray paint, yeah.
Well, it's not that, but.
Yeah.
He's obviously done so much. Dude, like that takes immense organization and like planning to organize that. He organizes he's accomplished a lot. Not a that's fucking overreach. He worked on like designing he designed software for batteries. What does that have to do with engineering? That has nothing to do with it.
I'm not saying he's a bad engineer.
But he obviously was.
What? It's his credit.
Exactly.
Like, it's based on like It's not based who's the best engineer. Huh?
Sounds long.
And how? And you.
Shaking balls.
Now this and that. That's how we do. Is it this and that?
Oh, yes. Jam after?
Possibly. I'm not sure it's.
Yes.
Oh, I got good work there.
I tried it, but
I injured myself too. I can't go right now. Yeah, we're curious if you guys play.
Can you put Windows 7 on boot camp?
Same idea.
Oh, no, not virtual. You gotta read this.
Make some hot stuff on cheap notification. It's pretty well done.
So, you know when you have Windows 7 for free.
That one's pretty.
Windows 7 at least for free. I compared it on my computer. It just runs that thing. Like,
That's my Achilles heel. I forgot about that. That's over. What do I get then? I'm not really that hungry. I always come back to it's actually on it's awesome. Actually, sorry for that. What? Dude, there's no sugar in Diet Coke.
yes.
Yeah.
They have to have a giveaway. There's a chance to have prizes. Something like that. First one I got to pull the sheet.
Yeah, that's great. That was just right there. Yeah, we'll get it now. No, see, there's more than one option. Just stick to
Yeah, I haven't got you on your show.
Oh, really?
Yes, see something.
What are you doing?
Whatever.
That depth perception as it
It's not double. Is it fun?